So, a very warm welcome to yet another episode of the TeachPitch podcast. For this episode, we're going on a very special journey. And we're going to Germany. And I have the sincere privilege and honor to talk to a Zimbabwean German MC, hip hop artist, and music producer. By the name of Metaphysics, right? That is your name, also known as Herbert Schwamborn. A very warm welcome to you.
Thank you, Aldo, for having me on your podcast. This is awesome.
No, thank you for saying yes to the opportunity. It's a real pleasure. You are the very first musician we have as a guest on our podcast. We are now around 50 guests or so, and it's been a great privilege talking to all of them, people from all over the world, and kind of in loads of professional capacities, from presidents to medical doctors to CIA spies to princesses to sheikhs and whatever more. And it's such a tremendous pleasure to talk to someone from the music industry, and I'm really looking forward to talk to you about your journey, which has been quite the journey, I must say, because I've been reading up on you, Herbert, and all the great things that you have been doing. One of the things and just for the listener. You're already somewhat of a veteran in the music industry. You started at which age, may I ask you that?
So firstly, thank you again for having me on the podcast. It's nice to be added to a huge list of what sounds like amazing guests that you've had. Presidents, sheiks, mafia, cooks. Thank you. Now you have a rapper. And this rapper started right, I'd say during high school. So at about the tender age of 16, I started music as a profession. I was drawn into the culture, I was drawn into the medium, and from a very early age, still in high school, I became a professional radio host, musician, producer, and I've been doing it ever since. I'm 48 years old now, and I have quite a bit of history in the industry.
Wow, I'm just pausing you at 48. You look like 38, if not younger.
Thank you.
So
thank you.
Kudos. You would not say that you're 48, and such an amazing journey. So it's not only this number of years, from high school to now, but it's also cross country, right? Because you are of Zimbabwean descent, but you're living in Germany. You were born in Zimbabwe, and that's also where you started.
That is correct.
At least your love for music started.
That is correct. That is correct. So I was born in what was then called Rhodesia. I was born in a city called Salisbury. This was pre-independence, when Zimbabwe was pretty much still a colonial country, still run by a minority of white British people of white British descent, known as Rhodesians. I was born during the time of what some may know as the apartheid system, where blacks were segregated. So I was a risk as a child, being of half black, half white descent. And then in 1980, Zimbabwe gained its independence from Rhodesia, and kind of things started to open up and become a little bit more liberal in terms of black and white couples being allowed to live together, get married, which was quite taboo before that. And that's when my life's journey began, and I was born in that environment in 1973, and kind of forged my identity as a person through that upbringing, through that culture, through that background. That was my background at the time, and probably still is.
I can imagine, because the little bit that I know from it gives you a very already from a very young age must have given you a very hard outlook on life and kind of loads of reality checks already early on because of the racial matters, the ongoing racial matters in a country like Rhodesia at the time. Is that correct?
Yeah, racism becomes very apparent. You grow up being very conscious of the differences, but as a child, it's also very normal. So as a child, you adapt. It's you're born in that, so you don't really know. It's only as you get older when you step back and you look at it and you're like, wow, that was actually quite a weird time in history or in the history of a country that actually existed, and I was born into that. But as a child, it's normal. You're either on this side or that side, and whoever has you at the time, wherever you're born, that's your environment, and you adapt pretty easy. So I didn't really notice it as a child as much. It wasn't so apparent. It just seemed like that was the norm. It's just now when I put it into context and look back and have become more politically conscious or politically aware, that you realize what it actually meant for somebody like myself and others who were born in such an environment.
Yeah. And so the road from back then Rhodesia to Germany, because you also partly grew up in Germany, is that correct?
No, not really. I only moved to Germany in my adult life.
Okay.
Germany was a place I always had in my imagination. I knew I was half German, but I had no relationship to Germany whatsoever. It was a place I'd imagine what snow might look like, or how the people... I thought everybody in Germany wore leather pants and yodeled. That was my perception of what Germany was as a child growing up. The Sound of Music, if you know that Disney film, The Sound of Music, that's what I thought Germany was. And it's only it's only in my adult life that I had the opportunity to travel, and I ended up coming to Germany and realizing that it was a very diverse, very open-minded, very modern thinking. They were into the stuff I was into, and then my adventure in Germany started quite late, but still at a good age where I was easily able to adapt and assimilate to German culture.
Yeah. Let's park Germany for now. I first want to talk about music and the role of music in your life, which has obviously been very significant. You said this started at high school. Where did it start?
Okay, so my musical journey started in my neighborhood. Like I said, I grew up segregated, so I grew up in a very black community. And then in 1980, when my father and mother could finally live together, they moved to a small suburb called Mabelrain. And in Mabelrain, there was a diversity of cultures beginning to merge, white and black people living together. And I'd like to say middle class upbringing. And because it was of middle class, there was a lot of people traveling, going to the UK, going to the US. And they'd come back and their children always had the latest trends from the UK or the US or wherever they had traveled. And they would bring with them, whether it was toys, whether it was different kind of sweets, they'd also bring back music. And it was like, wow, this is what out there sounds like. This whole culture that was emerging of hip hop. And it was just something I gravitated towards because it was like nothing I had ever heard. It was the sound of the time, the stories that were being told. So at a very young age, I was like, wow, I wish I could be part of that. I wish I could do something like that. So I was very drawn into that from a very early age, but the exposure came from this new awakening of an independent Zimbabwe.
And so this is you're born in 73, so this is your 7-8-year-old self. In 1980, your parents can move in together.
Right.
You're introduced to music, and a lot with music has to do with kind of your longing to be part of a community.
Well, because of the racial differences at the time, I didn't have a community. I didn't fit in with the black kids. I didn't fit in with the white kids. The only thing I had for my escape, or the only thing I could identify with, was the music. And especially this rebellious music that was also emerging in the early 80s, which was hip hop, that kind of spoke a very urban story that I could relate to. The beats made sense, the dance, the culture, the way the people dressed just made sense to me. And it was my way of creating my own identity from an early age, because I didn't fit into any of the norms at the time as a child of mixed descent.
And so you went first from listening to the music to becoming a musician yourself. What was that journey like? How long did that take you before you decided, listen, this is what I want to do.
It was a very natural process. I think people discover their talents from very early on in life. If you have a passion for something, it's almost genetic. You can't escape it. If you're born to be a gymnast, you're just born with the flexibility, and somehow you can jump high and you're confident to do those spins. If you're a businessman or entrepreneur, you're just born with an instinct, and from an early age you'll sell sweets, or like Warren Buffett, go around selling newspapers, because it's just your nature. It was exactly the same with me with the music. I discovered that this is what I liked, and I just had an instinct and a talent for it, that it wasn't a process like, oh, now I want to do this professionally. It was just like, wow, I like this. This is me. That's my identity. And whatever it takes, I'm going to do to make it happen. It was just a very natural transition. So already once I discovered this culture, this music, and don't forget, I was not really in a bubble. There was a community of people like me as well. And you become part of a society and a community, and you build and ideas and you exchange. And next thing, you're in a studio with the older guys, your mentors or the guys you look up to, or you're in the city and you're trying to impress girls or whatever it is. You just find yourself more and more adapting to the role of becoming an artist. In my case, that was how it was. Yeah.
And so at which age there's your first, was there your first song, or at which age you kind of created output?
I would say maybe at 9 years old, I had already started experimenting with making small mixtapes, recording my voice. My grandfather had visited from Germany and bought a ghetto blaster where you could record, one of those Casio, I think it was a Sanyo recorder, boombox with a little microphone in it. So from early, I was already doing very demo-like songs and just experimenting with what my voice sounds like, or how to loop a song and make it longer by taking one cassette and dubbing it with the other one and looping that. So from a very early age, I was already experimenting with how to record. But I was also blessed that my father always had an organ in the house. So I grew up with music in the house. My mom was an avid listener of music, and my dad could read sheet music, and I grew up with an organ. So like I said, it wasn't really a process, it was just nature. I was then doing what any young person who's interested in something would do.
Yeah, it went automatically.
It went automatically, yeah.
Nice. And then, so talk to me a little bit about Zimbabwe post 1980. You growing up there obviously being a culture of music, loads of creativity. It sounds like it. Loads of people who rebel against the atrocities of their history, and in some shape or form are looking for a new world in a way. Is that a correct portrayal? And how did you deal with that? What was your idea of Zimbabwe? Did you want to stay, or did you want to get out, or what was your idea kind of growing up? Not necessarily age 9, but older than that, so becoming an adult.
Well, I think for me, because I grew up in, like I said, a semi-middle class society, we had options and opportunities. I didn't grow up. After age 6, and when Zimbabwe had become independent and we moved into a suburb, into a proper home, with the first time I had seen a telephone, with electricity, that's, constant electricity, television that was now, just making its transition from black and white to color. There was just this new feeling of energy and revival for especially the older people, my peers. My mom could finally get her driving license, for example. There was just a feeling, a renewal, an energy that anything was possible, being a young black Zimbabwean or even of an older generation. So there was just a feeling of euphoria amongst the black community and a feeling of paranoia amongst the white community, because they were like, oh, we've lost power. How will the black people treat us? So a lot of white people started fleeing Zimbabwe and going to places like Australia, back to England, moving to South Africa. And those who stayed, I think they enjoyed this new beginning, this fresh start. And there was just a feeling of a sense of hope. The economy was still very good, so the money in circulation, you could enjoy yourself. The infrastructure was fantastic. There was cinemas, there was discos, there was drive-ins for recreation, golf, sports, you name it. And finally, black people could participate as equals. So there was this new excitement, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
And you feel it. As a young person, you feel it. You can just, you don't understand why, but you feel it. And yeah.
And you felt it, and you took in the right sense of the word, you took advantage of it as an artist, as a growing artist, as a performer, and also as a producer.
Exactly.
So when did you become someone passionate for love into really becoming a professional in music? And when, related to that, we want to talk about your first challenge, because just like any other of our guests, you've given us 3 challenges. And as a first challenge, you say that in your business, the funding and the financial support and getting your ideas off the ground is very important, right? So
exactly.
So how what was that like when with your first professional endeavor as a musician? When did that take place?
So during my time at high school, I think I'm not sure how your grading system is in the UK. Well, in the UK it's probably like ours because we form a colonial. So I'd say Form 4, if that means anything to you. Form 3, Form 4, which is the British system.
It will mean something to our listener, but I was raised in the Netherlands, so I don't have the form system.
So it might myself. Be grade 11 or something, grade 12,
grade 11,
some around there.
Yeah.
One of our teachers came in and asked if anybody would like to go and work for the radio station. There was a program that they were developing called Young Zimbabwe, and they were looking for a host. And I raised my hand. It sounded like something I could easily do and would love to do. And from an early age already, I started working in radio, doing broadcasting. And from that, I was exposed to the technical side, how a production is made, how a radio show is done. Which gave me a little bit of background that when it came to recording, the older kids would come to me for studio advice. One, because I had the capacity to do it. I had my little recorder that my grandfather had brought for me. I was one of the few who had the facility to record. And 2, because I was already in the industry and knew a little bit technically how to make it happen. So a lot of the older kids would come to me and automatically include me in the process of their recordings. And one of these particular recordings was for a group called Lethal Language. And they asked me if I'd like to be involved, if I'd like to rap a little part, which I did. And that very same evening, Terry Mahati, who was one of the guy who created this group, Lethal Language, had somehow managed to get the cassette onto radio. And it was so thrilling to think that the whole country was listening to my voice at that particular time. To hear myself on radio, in the room with my mom in the room, gathered with my friends around the radio, like, wow, we can actually do this. Like, we did this was amazing for me. I mean, I had been on radio before, but to now see the transition from host to artist in that sense, and to just see my mom's look and just the pride. I was like, yeah, I could definitely do this forever. So that was definitely the starting point when it really started transforming into a professional. It had the professional appeal. And yeah, obviously that's when you also start to learn that it's a very expensive hobby, studio time, studio equipment. And my parents, especially my dad, was very traditional, having grown up in post-World War II Germany. He wasn't really supportive of the arts. He understood it, but he preferred that I got a university degree or pursued some sort of technical career that I could depend on. So I didn't really have support besides from my mom, who was a housewife. I didn't have support from the family in terms of being able to go to them and say, hey, can you lend me some money for studio time, or I need to buy equipment? Or I had nobody to, that we, you know, especially as our community of young people, we couldn't really turn to our parents for the funding, for the support. So initially trying to record a song or make a demo or do the artwork or the photography, we had to really diversify on how we put our money together, how we financed, how we just supported our passion in our art. And those were really some of the early challenges, just being able to finance, you know, this dream.
And how did you manage that? Because I mean, I'm sure there are projects that didn't come to life, but how did you find funding then to get it to the next level? Who were funders at the time?
Well, that's, I suppose, when my entrepreneurial spirit started to emerge as well. I would set up little businesses at school, because don't forget, I was still at school at the time. I would set up little businesses, whether it was recording cassettes, dubbing cassettes from one cassette to the other, and then going to school and selling the copies, because I had the latest music. I was in the community. I had always the new material, and I'd sell cassettes. My father worked for VW. That's what brought him to Africa. And he'd have a lot of promotional posters sent from these car companies to promote. And sometimes they'd send so many that they couldn't put them in the showroom. And he'd give me tons of car posters, which I soon found out that would fetch a good price. So I'd take car posters to school, and every day would come back with at least $20, $30, save that up over the course of the month, have $300 to finance my music and go to studio. So I would do, you know, I would hustle at a young age. You know, I'd hustle my school. It all started at school, so I'd hustle at school, and I learned to save. I learned to sell, market, how to make something appealing, and those became facets that later on in life I still depend on and still use. The process hasn't changed. It's still the same formula. Yeah,
that's wonderful. That's I see you doing it. I see you hustling. I see you kind of you know, creating one avenue to build upon the other.
Right.
But you know, that's amazing. But also very good at such a young age. You know how to save, and that you know what you're investing in. Right. I mean, I can imagine that's not always easy. And you know, having such a tremendous ambition to be successful in the music industry, and to really grow there, that could not have been easy. So it's amazing that you started doing it at a very young age, and step by step you invested in it, and incredible that you also got there.
I mean,
I want to talk about.
Yeah, sorry. I was just going to say that the most important thing is that we didn't do it for financial gain or for success on that level. We did it primarily because it was fun. And again, that is the spirit that I carry till today. If you enjoy what you do, it allows you to pursue it further. So for me, the passion has to be fun. The process has to be enjoyable. And we enjoyed it. It's, you know, it wasn't like we were forced or being punished to become artists. We wanted to be. So it was a fun journey. But go ahead, you were about to ask a question.
No, I just want to because I think many listeners are wondering, like, okay, the journey from you being the host of a radio show, then becoming an artist, but the journey continues, and I think when you look for your name, which is Metaphysics, your artist name, then it's automatically associated with Sons of Mannheim, which is
Correct.
this multi-platinum selling group that it's extremely famous. It did so many things, still going, and there's still so many formats. But your journey just is not a typical kind of German journey, right? Because Sons of Mannheim, as someone based in the UK, I associate it with being in Germany, so to say.
100% correct.
But that's not at all where it started for you, because your first group you formed actually in Zimbabwe. Is that correct?
100% correct. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So the beginning obviously was Zimbabwe. First group was called a piece of, it was Lethal Language, and then that was still in high school. And then after high school, once I understood the process of creating music, I wanted to pursue it really as my career, I suppose. And that's when we started really pushing for it to become financially successful. And I created a project called A Piece of Ebony, which did very well. We got an international recording deal at a very early age. We were signed to a South African record company, Island Records, Chris Blackwell, Bob Marley. That's the label that had Bob Marley. They were interested in signing us. We had a #1 hit record in Zimbabwe, the longest charting hit record. That now started opening my mind to the corporate side of the music business, because at an early age now I'm being exposed to contracts. I don't have a lawyer. I can't reference anything with my parents. They have no idea about the music industry. So I'm now having to read my own contracts. I'm now having to negotiate the best opportunities with record companies that have existed for years. And here I am, this young guy with this attitude of we can do this when we know what we want. So already from an early age, the corporate aspect started coming into not just being a creative, but also having to think in terms of management skills, in terms of negotiation skills. And yeah, Piece of Ebony became a very successful group at the time, quite revolutionary, quite groundbreaking. We're celebrating our 30th anniversary this year, actually. We've just finished the album just to commemorate that. We've shot some amazing videos in Zimbabwe. I've been in Zimbabwe 3 weeks ago, and we've done videos, interviews. I'm in the process now of getting that ready for release. But again, it's just opened and broadened my perspective to the technical, the corporate, and the artistic side of things, which is the tools and the facets that are needed in this industry.
And because a lot of people are trying to break into this industry, and they still are, and we're going to talk about your challenge about adaptation, and that such an industry changes in formats, and there's one thing being the creative, but then there's also the word says it, if you want to make money out of it, it's an industry, and making sure it is profitable.
Right.
Is there any kind of is there anything that, if you were now to start a new venture in music, that you would say, that you would or would not do? So is there any compromise you feel you're making when making music for the sake of it being corporate?
In the last week, I've been having brainstorming sessions with my younger brother, who is also a musician, quite successful. He's also based in Germany, but he's had a US top 10 Billboard chart topper. He's younger than I am. He's fresh. He's in touch with what the young people are doing. My son has just turned 11. He's also, a fan of music. He's using technology to access how he listens to music. And we usually have weekly brainstorming meetings at the moment, because we're developing new ideas. And at our last meeting, we came to the conclusion that in this time, you have to do it all. You know, if you want to be successful in this industry right now, you have to be shameless, you have to be brave, you have to be bold, you have to be diverse, and you have to be willing to do what it takes and do it all. There's not one thing you should focus on, because there's so many different elements these days to what makes a musician. Musicians are more content creators these days than they are just a vocal element. They are micro businesses within themselves. And we were joking around and saying a boxer like Floyd Mayweather understood the future of boxing by not only becoming the boxer, but also becoming the promoter, becoming the guy who actually puts the boxing event and elite and cutting out the middlemen, taking out the former structure where a boxer was just a boxer and managed and sold off as a slave. The boxer is now management, he is now promoter, he is now, and I think that's the same that goes for the new age musician. You have to be able to put on different caps at different times and just do what it takes to stay relevant and just float in this industry, because it's not easy at the moment. It's oversaturated. There's so much going on. It's so diverse, and pretty much.
I think you're very right. You know, as you say, there's just so much content out there, and how are you distinctive with that content, and how do you make sure that people find it and that people respond to it and say, hey, this is what I want to be a part of.
Correct.
But having said that, you also, as you say, need to know the setup of a contract with a record company and know that you're getting, you know, worth your while out of it, and you know that you are financially compensated in the right way. You need to, you know, make sure your tours are booked, that the rights of your music are properly sold, etc., etc., etc.
Exactly.
But it sounds like a lot. That it's really, is it not almost too much just for one person to all take that on, or would you say, well, actually, it is doable? You just need to know a little bit of everything.
Well, because I've been in the industry for so long, for a person like me, it is doable, and it's still very much fun. I enjoy it. And because I am the artist as well, it's very easy to manage. I suppose it would be difficult if I had to do it for somebody else as a service. Then I'd meet challenges. But because I can work at my own pace, and I'm able to call the shots, and I know exactly what I need, I can focus on exactly just those key points. I don't have to experiment when I go to bed at night, and I, you know, can just brainstorm and think, what do I need to do tomorrow? What are the key things that I need to concentrate on? Who are the key people I need to speak to? I can really hone into what is necessary without the distractions. And then with the technology and with the internet and iPhones and cell phones, it's so convenient that you can just drop anyone a message around the world. If they're interested, you make a sale, you make a partnership, you make an agreement, and you move on. There's not so much the clutter as maybe there was 20 years ago in the industry, where nobody knew who's doing what, who's responsible for what. You had to go through so many different people, and it slowed the process down, and it made it that much more expensive. It's become easier to micromanage. It's become easier to finance even, because you don't need to get a full camera crew anymore to shoot a video. You don't need huge studio equipment to record your vocals anymore. You know, it's right now you just need to be able to network. You need to know who to speak to, when to speak to them, and build partnerships. And over the years, I've learned how to do that, and I can really concentrate on just the key elements of the industry.
Of those things.
Yeah.
I think you're right. I think you're right in saying that a lot of things are a lot more transparent and a lot more transactional, for that matter.
Right.
You very quickly see what someone can do for you. And if it doesn't work out, then no hard feelings, everyone moves on fairly quickly.
Right.
It's not necessarily that you kind of need to, you know, there's no lobbying beforehand or kind of any aftercare that needs to take place in the relationship. You can just go for, okay, is this going to fly? is there a mutual interest here? If yes, then let's do it. And if not, then no hard feelings, but then we're both moving on, right? So I do think that's made it easier. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I do see that happening. But still, I it's not a light task, specifically for young people who just come into the industry, to kind of, knowing where to find everything, and also making sure that it all grows as they envisioned, and also for them not to be exploited. I can imagine that there's just so much that's happening, and
but that's in any industry,
perhaps
ideas are always stolen. The actual inventors are never credited. And look at any successful business, whether it's Facebook, it's a stolen idea. Whether it's Microsoft and Windows, this borrowed technology from pre-existing technologies. And the successful people in any industry are usually not the creators. They're the ones who just figured out the niche. McDonald's, it's not the McDonald's brothers, whoever they were, that made it. It's some guy who used to sell vacuum cleaners who saw a niche. And it's the same in any industry. It's are you able to take advantage of the opportunities? Do you really understand the value of your brand? And do you know how to grow it and take it to the next step? Are you aware of your intellectual property? Are you aware of your role in that industry? Are you, do you have the resources to grow it? If not, somebody's going to fill that space, or somebody's going to take advantage of you because they may see the potential in you that you don't see in yourself. And that's happening every day in every industry.
Yeah. Thank you for taking us on this journey. I think it's extremely interesting, and I definitely want to hear more. First, I'm going to go to your second challenge, because as a second challenge, you said that your racial background has been an issue in your growth as an artist. I think you already spoke a little bit about growing up in Rhodesia.
Yes.
And of course, did you notice, kind of, as growing up as an artist, that race was still an issue for you, or was it more kind of in the early days?
Race has always been very apparent. Firstly, growing up in Zimbabwe, where it was very extreme at the time, and then getting my first record deal in South Africa, which was even worse, which really had still an existing apartheid system, a very segregated system. And then going to Germany as a minority black person and realizing, there are no black bus drivers, especially at the time when I came. Why is every black person in this country, why do they only sit and service toilets? Why are there no professionals, no doctors, no nurses when I go to a hospital? And then you reference and go, I remember this from my childhood. This is the minority situation. And then you just become a novelty first, like the token black guy or whatever it is. So especially in my world, racism has always been apparent. But I think with the emergence of diverse technological growth, the Netflix, the Spotifys, the YouTubes, there's now a new shift in racist or racial dynamics, and it's slowly beginning to dissolve. It's not as apparent because people are now exposed to a wider global aspect of what it means to be human. We are now in real time, we can see what's happening in China, Ukraine. We know the news, what's happening in Ukraine. If there's an earthquake anywhere in the world, we're affected by it. Global shifts affect us all. And we're beginning to see ourselves more and more, I think, as humans. And that is, I think, in part credited to tech, credited to how, look, we're having a conversation. You're sitting comfortably wherever you are. I'm not sure where you are right now. I'm here in Germany.
I'm in Scotland.
And we're speaking in real time. And it's a face-to-face conversation. And, look at just between us, the racial diversity. And we begin to see that we share a lot of similarities that I'm sure you, as a business owner as well, a lot of what I'm talking about, you can relate to because you know what it takes to start a business, to fund a business. And you're like, oh, wow. I had similar struggles as well, trying to set up my business. And I think the more we have these conversations as humans, the more we begin to dissolve the racial aspect. And I see that the older I get now, I really see, especially for my son, I really see that element of racism is dissolving. Of course, there's still incidences, like in the US, where there's racially motivated brutality, Black Lives Matter, or whatever it is. But more and more, I think that this society is waking up. And especially with this COVID situation, we all realized that it could all end for all of us at any given, well, this is what they were selling us, trying to, the fear factor. But it was a pause button for the human race to actually think, wow, we could all be extinct just like that. And I think we're beginning to question our fragility as a society, as a culture, as a people, as a nation, as a world, as a race, a global race. And I see that now changing for the better, for the positive.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I like what you said, like we hit pause, and I mean, a lot of things were, we were confronted with a lot of end of life situations, right? I think a lot more than we were before because of the pandemic, and you saw how quickly things could be over. People that were there 1 minute and the next minute they were not, and I don't think, me personally, I haven't been confronted with it at such a scale and so quickly that so many people passed because of COVID, because they they didn't have the right support or whatever more. And it did get me to think, like, what is it that I want to do, but also what you want to do for humanity,
right?
And how do you want to connect with one another?
Exactly.
So the exchange and I think also coming to the conclusion that you need one another, right? That's also very important. The information sharing is crucial.
Exactly.
Right? What happened in Wuhan? We need to know what happened there, so we can prevent it from happening here, right? So only that in and of itself, that alone is already so much information, so much that we could use for scientific progress, for saving lives. And I think that's a very relevant thing. And I hope you're right that it will fade any racial boundaries that were there before, because they're so not necessary, so archaic in that sense, and absolutely, I'd be happy if we progress in that direction. Fingers crossed. But at the same time, having said that, I'm also extremely sad for what's happening in Ukraine, but also in Afghanistan, where it almost feels like we're going back in time. So I don't, I the optimist in me wants to agree with you, but I also see things happening elsewhere that I'm like, it's like going back in time. Which is the sadness of the world.
There's still an element of human nature, and unfortunately, humans tend to be greedy. Humans tend to be selfish. Humans tend to think about their own existence first. And that's unfortunately by design. The grand architect, whoever's behind the programming of this matrix, made it like that. And until somebody can go into the mainframe and change how we are actually programmed, unfortunately, there will always be some sort of conflict. And we don't even have to scale it up to a global level. Just families within their brothers who grew up together with the same mother having disputes and fighting against each other, not talking, and you're literally born in the same house, and I will never speak to him again. Tell him I'm not here. Conflict is inevitable, even at the micro level of family. So imagine just scaling it up to racial or society. Of course, that's going to exist. Unfortunately, like I said, we'd have to really go into the mainframe of our divine programming to change that aspect.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Herbert, for taking me on this journey. And we can talk for hours about this. We're not going to resolve it in this podcast episode, but it's good that we at least look at it. Tell me about Sons of Mannheim, because whether you like it or not, that's a big accolade on your musical career. How did you get involved?
Sons of Mannheim is a multi-platinum German band. It's celebrating its 25th anniversary this year, or actually last year. It's a project that was started by a German superstar by the name of Xavier Naidoo. Xavier Naidoo is very, very well known in Germany, and he had promised his friends from his area that he grew up, which is called Mannheim, that if he ever became successful, that he would come back and take his friends with him on the journey. So he created the Sons of Mannheim, which was a community of his friends that he grew up with, musicians that he liked. And in the Mannheim area, there used to be an American GI base, and one of the members of the band, MC, was of American heritage, and he was their rapper. And just before their first album was to be released, MC had a change of heart. He became fully immersed in the Christian world, and he felt that being part of something like the Sons of Mannheim was blasphemous to his God or very not Christian, and he quit and left them without a rapper. At that time, I had just arrived in Germany and obviously kind of built a reputation as a rapper within the street community. I was doing recordings, and my manager at the time, Tina Rotloff, was like, hey, there's a band from this city called Mannheim. They've just lost their rapper, that he was the English speaking element of the group. Would you like maybe to go and see if you guys have some sort of, symbiosis, if you guys can work together, if something can gel? So I went to Mannheim and instantly connected with the guys. And it was just in time I managed to replace MC and record new raps for them. And within weeks, the first album was released, and I was on it, and it became a very successful album, a very successful project. And I've been with them 25 years later. We still rocking. This Sunday, actually, I'm not sure when the podcast comes out, but I'll just say this Sunday. I won't actually mention which date, but this Sunday we have a concert expecting at least 16,000 people to turn out. So that's pretty awesome for a group that's 20. Very few bands can celebrate 25 years and still be relevant, and I'm still very happy that I was given that opportunity to be part of that band, and 25 years later to still be part of it and still see us actively engaged and still performing and still working. To put it in a nutshell.
That's fascinating, and congrats. It sounds like an amazing adventure, and 25 years and counting. What do you think has made it so successful until today? What's the secret of Sons of Mannheim?
I think the key secret is, one, Xavier Naidoo's success, undeniably. He has such a loyal fan base. Unfortunately, Xavier is no longer with the group. He quit the band, I'd say maybe 8 years ago. So we've had to now just keep the tradition going. But I would say more importantly is just the diversity. We're multicultural. Our music is not a particular genre. We cater for everybody from very young to older audience. Three, the quality is just amazing. It's just really a collective of amazing musicians. So I think, like with any successful business or any enterprise, if you service your customer with quality, consistency, and passion, and you don't water your brand down, and you don't compromise your brand, you maintain brand loyalty, and your customer grows with you and they stay loyal forever. And I think those are probably the key elements to what make Soehne Mannheim successful.
That makes a lot of sense. And again, congratulations on growing this journey 25 years on, and so many more plans and things to come. I was just curious, the name Metaphysics, you might not want to say, which is fine, but where does it come from as an artist name?
The name actually got created in New York. It's a weird story, but I was invited to a it was a clothing store, and it was a social event, and I had no idea. It's just I met somebody on the street, and it was like, hey, we're going to this clothing store. Do you want to come with us? The owner has closed it, and we're going to have a little private event there. And I was actually walking around the streets of New York looking for weed at the time, and I thought, oh, maybe somebody has weed, some marijuana that I could go and smoke. They look like smokers. Sure, I'll follow you guys. Let's go. And then a piece of paper started going around the room, and they gave it to me first. So I assumed they wanted to get on our details, our names and our numbers, so they could invite us maybe again for the next event. So I wrote my name, Herbert Schwamborn. I was about to write my phone number, and the guy asked me, what are you doing? Just your name. I was like, oh, okay. So I passed the paper back to him, and this paper goes around the room. And I forget about the paper for 30 minutes because I had found somebody who had some weed. We're smoking, we're talking. 30 minutes later, somebody goes on the microphone and says, oh, welcome to the rap battle, and the rap battle is about to start. And first up in the rap battle, we have couldn't read my name. And I was like, oh no, they think that's my artist name. Oh no, this is so embarrassing. So I thought the next time if I'm ever in a situation like that, I'm going to have the coolest name possible. Something that's unforgettable, something that's intimidating. And I went back and formulated. And at the time, I was actually very passionate about the concept of self, spirituality, and separating myself from religion. I was brought up Christian, but during my travels, I learned about Buddhism, I learned about Taoism, I learned about Asian or Indian belief systems, more traditional African belief systems, and started going into the philosophy of theology. And that bridges into the aspect of the study of metaphysics. So I was by nature a metaphysician or studying metaphysics, and I thought that would be a fitting name as an artist as well, because it would encompass my mentality at the time, and it just sounded cool. So I became Metaphysics. And yeah, we've created the Crypto Brother Enterprises, which is what we want to make the new way of approaching the music industry. Embracing tech, fully embracing tech, using every facet of technology to its extreme to build a brand, to become the tech, within the case of Phil. And yeah, so through that, I've been exposed to a lot of the crypto world. We've helped build some brands in the crypto space, some tokens that are out there from Switzerland, which has allowed me to learn how to set up ICOs, how it's run, how to create value behind a token like Shiba Inu now, and all these tokens that exist, how to try and stay relevant in that space, but also at the same time how to bridge the tech world and the art world. And that's where I am right now. My brother and I, Phil included, and another partner that I have called Dr. Christian Plutz. This is what we're working on right now.
Where are you kind of in the phase of rolling this out? So it's great to hear you have someone as renowned as Phil on board, who's already such a great artist. Where are you currently? What are you thinking in terms of rollout and kind of presenting this to the world?
Well, we're targeting World DNA Day next year to host our event, which is going to be a mixture of live performance. We're trying to get as many of Phil's friends to participate, trying to get maybe an artist like Sting, who already owns Phil's work, to just come and support, maybe do a couple of songs. Trying to get my band, the Zen Mannheims, to play at the event, and have a festival atmosphere. We're in talks with Christie's of London, but they have an NFT department in New York. We've been in touch with them because my partner, Dr. Christian Plotz, recently sold an artwork at Christie's. And we have a good connection through that sale. It fetched quite a lot of money, and he's in the books. They remember him, they know him as a successful art dealer. So we have this connection with a reputable art house. With Christie's is, you know, it's the top auction house for artwork. We have this I don't want to say connection, but that's what it is. We have the artist, Phil, who signed off and agreed to actually do this. It's a huge step for anybody to say, yeah, I'm ready to actually give my DNA out as an artwork. What our challenges was how to realize it in terms of storage, data storage, how to protect it, and how to make it interesting for the end buyer to say, yes, I do want to own somebody's DNA in the form of artwork. How to turn that into an NFT that is also attractive, that somebody can walk around and then show in their wallet that, look, I am the owner of this collection, which is Phil L. Harold. So those were our specific challenges, but with time, with meeting you guys, what you guys do, with diving deeper into the institutes that actually do the DNA sequencing, we're learning more and more, and it's in terms of our time frame, I think it's very realistic, and I think it's very possible that we will meet our deadline, and we pretty much have everything that we need to make this a success. The only thing now is to raise the capital and the finance to market it so that more people are aware of what we're trying to do, and obviously to pay for the production that is then needed if we are to fly in a Snoop Dogg or a Sting or whoever it is. That's going to cost a bit of money. So we're at the fundraising point right now to start raising the capital to pay for these basic necessities to host such a production. But we're pretty much there.
Yeah. And how can people get involved? So other than just keeping an eye out for cryptogenetics, is that the name of the project?
Cryptogenic. Cryptogenic is the name of the project. We're going to start rolling it out and creating obviously our web footprint so that we can funnel and direct traffic to that. We weren't ready to do that just yet because we needed to put all the pieces of the puzzle, the foundation together. We needed to figure out the storage. We needed Phil to fully commit and say he's doing it. We needed the DNA first sequenced. We got the Helmholtz Institute, a very renowned institute in Germany, to do the sequencing. So before we rolled it out and made it public, we needed to have all the elements together, which we have now. And I'd say our second phase now is to create the digital platforms, the footprint that we can now start directing people towards. And that's our next step. So I'm not really going to say, oh, if you want to follow, if you want to participate, now is the time. Yeah. We still need at least a few months to start the rollout campaign.
Sure.
So
yeah. But it's already so exciting. I'm so excited, Herbert, for this journey, and also the fact that you've got such big names and such a great infrastructure already set out, and these people who are willing and able to help, not only for the NFT space in this decentralized world, but also really to properly advance scientific research and to find proper cures for rare diseases, and it also being on the crossroads of technology, of artistry, and most importantly for your music. So to be continued, and I hope that we can soon share relevant details on this project to be launched at World DNA Day next year.
Yeah,
so
awesome.
That sounds very exciting.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing all of this, Herbert. Before we close off, because it's been a wonderful interview, my two very last questions, and these are questions that I ask all my guests. One is around reading. I always ask my guests if they're into reading or absorbing information. Doesn't necessarily have to be reading a book. It could also be a website or a magazine or whatever. But is there anything that has inspired you to become who you are today? And if so, what would you kind of recommend for others to read in their journey?
Oh, I read very awkward books as a metaphysician. I read a lot of information online. I try to stay very current. I can reference books like the Egyptian Book of the Dead, the Urantia book, the Go-Tos, your Paulo Coelho's, motivational books, but it's so diverse in terms of referencing a book to somebody, because it depends on a person's taste and what they're after. Some people read recreationally. I try to read things that help me, that benefit my career. So I read a lot of biographies, especially about other artists, what their journey was. And more recently with Netflix and more of these documentaries coming out, I actually spend more time watching documentaries about startups, companies, tech. I'm going through a phase right now where I'm also beginning to watch a lot of content made in the 1920s when cameras were finding their relevance. So I'm at a point right now where I'm very comfortable watching information without an orator, without having to read. I just recently watched Man and His Camera, which is a Russian film from the 1920s. It's a documentary of everything that was happening in Russia at the time with no words. Very exciting, very interesting to come up with your own conclusion and to see the use of what was, the lens he's using is a Carl Zeiss lens, to see that already in 1920, Carl Zeiss was relevant, to already see people's reactions to a camera in their environment, because we take cameras for granted. It's everywhere. So I'm going through a silent phase where I'm more observing the ballet of life. I'm in the garden watching how bees work and appreciating nature. So to reference a good book, I'd say there's a lot of literature. I was forced to read the Bible. I was forced to read a lot of books on philosophy, Eastern philosophy. But recently, a good friend of mine and partner from my first group, A Piece of Ebony, has also written his own book called The Beginning. And it's a biography about our group, our band. And that is the last book I wrote. And that was a very surreal, last book I read. And that was a very surreal feeling to read a book from somebody you know so intimately, but to also read about yourself in the book. So The Beginning from Tony Chihota, which is pretty much a biography about our growing up. And we're now in the process of turning that into a screenplay. And for me, that is one of the most compelling and touching books I've ever read, because I have a connection with the author.
A real connection.
A real connection, and I'm in the pages of the book. So that would be, to answer your question. What's the second question?
So I'm just going to make sure that everyone heard you okay. So it's The Beginning by Tony Chihota that you recommend. I just wanted to ask as a follow-up question, which other biography of an artist that you liked? Because, just sticking to your style, is there any other biography that stands out for you? Any recent biography that you read? I love to read biographies as well.
Nelson Mandela. I've got the DMX book, Earl, the Wu-Tang Clan. At the end of the day, I'm a rap person. I'm fascinated I'm fascinated by people who made something out of nothing, out of the hardship of growing up in the Bronx or wherever it is, and using the most limited resources to create these empires. And it's something I relate very well to. So I read a lot about, musical, especially hip hop biographies, and
Nice.
It's,
nice.
It's embarrassing to reference them because it's so niche specific. It's so
but
culture specific.
It's your world. It's your life. No, that's what we want to hear, because I'm trying to, for any young metaphysics, the next generation of metaphysics artists, the next Herbert Schwamborns. If you're young, if you would recommend a book to your younger self, which one would you read? Now, I'm definitely the book of Tony Chiot at the beginning, I think, would be a very good recommendation.
Awesome.
I'm just wondering if there's another one that you would say, like, hey, little Herbert, read this one. Just as a next, as a source of inspiration.
Lord of the Rings. Lord of the Rings.
Lord of the Rings. Okay.
That's the first book that was so huge in size, and I was like, "Am I ever going to finish this?" And it gave me the discipline to be patient enough to read a book of such size. So, and it was very enjoyable and very stimulating, and it's an awesome story. So if you want to just practice the discipline of reading, start with a book that's going to immerse you into that world. And I love fiction, and Lord of the Rings was one of the best reads for me, yes, personally.
Nice. Thank you so much. And then the very last question. Now let's make this your podcast. This is the Metaphysics podcast.
Welcome.
And you can invite a guest. Who would be your number one guest? Who would you want to talk to?
Not want to talk to. Who do I have to talk to? Elon Musk.
Okay. You want to have a word with him?
I want to ask him for money. I want him to be a sponsor of my event. He's just opened his company in Berlin. He's South African, like I am. He's disruptive. He is changing the internet, just acquiring Twitter. What's he going to do with it? How is he going to use it? I have a few questions for Elon. So can you make that happen?
Yeah, definitely. Elon, if you're listening, or people of Elon, you never know how these things go, Herbert. You never know how these things go. So if you're listening, we want to talk to you. So get in contact. I do think he's also a fascinating person, so I'm sure it's going to make for a great conversation anyhow.
Yeah.
It's not only about the funding. I do think, a friend or foe, he's a very interesting character.
I really appreciate the fact that he's South African, the fact that he really knows how to pitch, how to sell, how to use the internet, and how to build functioning utilities. His things work, and he's an anomaly in that sense. So that would be the guy.
Wonderful recommendation. Herbert Schwamborn, or Metaphysics, thank you so much for your time. This has been a lovely conversation. I wish you all the best in your further career, whether it is a career in music or a career in the crypto world, or any of the many other ventures you're involved in. I'm sure we're going to hear a lot more about you. Thank you so much for doing this interview. Metaphysics, Herbert Schwamborn.